The warning alarm screamed to the Kalari Command Center as another agricultural world went dark on their holographic display. Ambassador Veltar watched helplessly as the glowing that representing Kalari Prime turned from green to red, joining 46 other dead worlds consumed by the crystalline nightmare they call the Shard Collective. "Sir, we're receiving the final transmission from Kalari Prime," his communications officer whispered, his voice trembling. The young Kalari's blue skin had turned pale with fear. Veltar closed his eyes as the desperate voices of his people filled the command center. Farmers screaming as their crops turned to silicon dust. Children crying for parents who would never come home. Cities going silent as the crystal invaders consumed everything organic in their path. The Shard Collective moved like a plague across their peaceful worlds. These silicon-based creatures didn't just kill, they consumed. Every plant, every animal, every living thing became food for their endless expansion. The Kalari had tried fighting back, but their gentle nature meant they had no real weapons, no military doctrine beyond basic defense. How long until they reach our core systems? Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer would break his heart. 17 days, sir. Maybe less if they maintain their current consumption rate. Veltar nodded slowly. The Kalari Confederation, a peaceful alliance that had thrived for over 3 centuries, was about to become extinct. Their advanced medicine, their beautiful art, their philosophy of harmony with nature, all of it would be reduced to crystalline dust. But they had one last option, one desperate gamble that might save someone, even if it couldn't save them. Open a channel on all galactic frequencies, Veltar ordered. Emergency broadcast, maximum range. The communications array hummed to life, sending their plea across the galaxy. Veltar stepped forward, knowing this might be the last official act of his dying civilization. "This is Ambassador Veltar of the Kalari Confederation broadcasting on all emergency channels. Our worlds are under attack by the Shard Collective. 47 agricultural systems have been completely consumed. Our people are dying. We are a peaceful species with no military capability to resist this threat." He paused, watching another world turn red on his display. His home world, the planet where his children had been born. "We offer complete technological exchange, territorial concessions, and full alliance membership to any civilization capable of military intervention. We have advanced medical technology, agricultural techniques, and mineral processing that could benefit any species willing to help us survive." The responses came quickly. The Altarian Republic sent a formal message of sympathy and offered to accept refugees. The Vegan Assembly promised to light ceremonial candles for their fallen. The mighty Centauri Alliance, with their powerful fleets, politely explained they couldn't risk their own people in such a hopeless situation. Hope turned to despair as message after message arrived, offering prayers, thoughts, and refugee assistance, but no military help. The galaxy's civilizations had grown comfortable with peace, and none wanted to risk war with an enemy that had proven unstoppable. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, Lieutenant Commander Jack Morrison sat at his monitoring station on the edge of human space. His job was simple but boring. Scan deep space frequencies for anything unusual and forward interesting findings to Fleet Command. Most days brought nothing but static and the occasional lost cargo ship. Today was different. The alien transmission cut through the background noise like a knife. Jack's translation software struggled with the unfamiliar language, but the desperation in the speaker's voice needed no translation. This wasn't a routine communication. This was a death scream. "Holy hell," Jack muttered, leaning forward in his chair. The tactical data embedded in the message made his eyes widen. Swarm formations, predictable movement patterns, vulnerability to temperature changes. This wasn't some unstoppable force. This was a tactical problem with a clear solution. He forwarded the message immediately to Fleet Admiral Kate Sullivan at Terra Command, flagging as both first contact and potential humanitarian crisis. Sullivan was reviewing supply reports when Morrison's message arrived. She'd been expecting another boring day of logistics and training exercises. Instead, she found herself staring at the galaxy's first documented plea for military assistance from an unknown alien species. The tactical analysis made her smile grimly. The Shard Collective fought like insects Overwhelming numbers, predictable patterns. No real strategy beyond consumption. Against civilians and peaceful species, they'd be unstoppable. Against humans, they'd be target practice. Get me General Harrison and Admiral Bradley. Sullivan ordered her aid. And prep the 5th, 7th, and 9th fleets for immediate deployment. Looks like we're about to make some new friends. 3 hours later, Veltar's communication array suddenly crackled with an incoming message from an unknown system labeled simply Sol 3. The voice that emerged was crisp, professional, and completely matter-of-fact. Kalari Confederation. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call and are dispatching immediate military assistance. Expect our arrival in 72 hours. Transmitting tactical coordination frequencies now. Veltar stared at his communications panel in shock. In 3 centuries of galactic diplomacy, no species had ever responded to a military crisis with such immediate action. Most civilizations spent months debating and forming committees before making any decision. But something in that human voice suggested these weren't most civilizations. Veltar's hands shook as he stared at the communication panel. After receiving nothing but sympathy messages and polite refusals from across the galaxy, this direct response from the mysterious Sol system felt like a dream. But dreams didn't usually sound so calm and professional when discussing military intervention against an unstoppable enemy. Admiral Sullivan. Veltar transmitted back, his translator working overtime with the strange human language. We are deeply grateful for your response. However, you should understand the scope of this crisis. The Shard Collective has consumed 47 worlds. Their numbers exceed billions. They have proven unstoppable against every defense we've attempted. The response came back almost instantly, as if the human admiral had been expecting this question. Understood, Ambassador. We've analyzed your tactical data. Standard swarm formation with predictable movement patterns. No aerial capabilities detected. Vulnerability to rapid temperature fluctuation confirmed. We're treating this as a Category 3 pest control operation. Veltar blinked rapidly, a Kalari expression of confusion. Pest control? These crystalline monsters had destroyed entire civilizations, and humans were calling it pest control? Admiral, perhaps there's been a translation error. How many ships are you sending? 36 vessels, approximately 12,000 personnel. Standard expeditionary force for this type of engagement. The Kalari Command Center fell completely silent. Every officer present turned to stare at Veltar, their blue faces showing the same expression of disbelief. 12,000 soldiers against billions of invaders? This had to be some kind of mistake or mistranslation. But before Veltar could respond, his tactical officer's voice cut through the silence. Sir, we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures at the edge of our system. Multiple contacts, moving in perfect formation. The main display shifted to show the incoming fleet. 36 human ships dropped out of hyperspace with mechanical precision, immediately forming what could only be described as a hunting formation. These weren't the peaceful, rounded vessels common throughout the galaxy. These ships looked like they'd been designed for one purpose: war. Admiral Tom Bradley stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical displays with the calm expression of someone who'd done this many times before. Around him, his crew moved with efficient precision, preparing for combat operations. All ships, this is Bradley. Confirmed weapon systems are green and ready. Intelligence reports suggest the enemy uses swarm tactics with minimal coordination between units. We'll use standard pack formation, isolate, divide, and eliminate. Captain Riley Johnson's voice crackled over the communications channel from the destroyer New York. Admiral, should we attempt to establish communication with the enemy first? Maybe try diplomatic solutions. Bradley actually chuckled at the suggestion. Captain, you're talking about silicon-based life forms that consume organic matter for sustenance. What exactly would you negotiate? Whether they eat us quickly or slowly? Lieutenant Colonel Mason Davis, commanding the Marine Detachment, joined the conversation. Sir, ground teams are prepped and ready. We've loaded standard anti-insect ordnance and atmospheric processors. Should we coordinate with the local alien forces? Negative. The Kalari are civilians caught in a war zone. Our job is to clear the threats and let them rebuild in peace. Aboard the Kalari command ship, Veltar watched the human fleet maneuver with growing amazement and terror. These ships moved like predators, each vessel covering specific angles of attack while maintaining perfect formation integrity. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen in galactic military doctrine. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, "the humans are requesting tactical data on shard ground positions. They want to know about underground tunnel networks and mineral composition of affected worlds. Give them everything we have," Veltar ordered, "and ask them if they need additional support. We can provide medical assistance, supplies, anything they require." The response from Admiral Sullivan was polite but firm. "Negative on additional support, Ambassador. We prefer to handle pest control operations with our own personnel. Your people should maintain safe distance and prepare to begin reconstruction operations once we've cleared the infestation." Infestation. The word hit Veltar like a physical blow. These crystalline monsters that had destroyed his civilization were being treated like insects in a garden. The humans spoke about military operations against an enemy that had proven unstoppable with the same casual tone they might use to discuss weekend plans. Captain Rachel Torres, commanding the human medical ship Mercy, transmitted directly to the Kalari Command Center. "Ambassador Veltar, we're establishing field hospitals on 3 of your outer worlds. Our medical teams can treat both human casualties and Kalari civilians. We've studied your physiology from the cultural data you transmitted and adapted our equipment accordingly." This casual mention of human casualties made Veltar's blood run cold. These people were planning to take losses. They'd studied Kalari biology, not understand a new species, but to treat their wounded after fighting monsters that had consumed entire worlds. "Admiral Sullivan," Veltar transmitted desperately, "perhaps we should discuss strategy first. The Shard Collective's attack patterns, their defensive capabilities, already analyzed, Ambassador. We'll have preliminary operations completed within 72 hours. The enemy's weakness to coordinated assault and temperature variation makes this a straightforward elimination protocol." As the human fleet moved toward the infected worlds, Veltar realized something that chilled him more than the approaching battles. These humans weren't heroes rushing to save the day. They weren't even soldiers facing a desperate last stand against impossible odds. They were exterminators who'd found a bug problem that needed solving, and they seemed almost bored by the prospect. The diplomatic meeting chamber aboard the human flagship felt unnaturally cold to Veltar. Everything about the ship seemed designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Metal walls, harsh lighting, and furniture that looked more functional than welcoming. But what truly unsettled him was how relaxed the humans appeared while discussing military operations that would determine his species' survival. Captain Lisa Mitchell, humanity's diplomatic liaison, sat across from the Kalari delegation with a cup of something steaming hot. She'd introduced it as coffee and explained it was a mild stimulant that helped humans stay alert. The casual way she sipped it while discussing warfare made Veltar deeply uncomfortable. "So, Ambassador," Mitchell began, pulling up a holographic display, "before we begin operations, our xenobiology team needs to understand your species' environmental requirements. Temperature ranges, atmospheric needs, that sort of thing." "Of course," Veltar replied, grateful to discuss something other than military tactics. "We prefer temperate climates, oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere with minimal trace gases. We cannot survive in extreme temperatures or toxic environments." Mitchell nodded, making notes on her tablet. "Standard class, 1 environmental requirements. Similar to most galactic species." She paused, studying her data. "Speaking of environmental classifications, our database shows an interesting discrepancy. According to galactic records, humans evolve on class 12 Deathworld." The Kalari delegation exchanged glances. Veltar's translator must have malfunctioned. Class 12 Deathworlds were theoretical constructs, planets so hostile that complex life shouldn't be possible. "I'm sorry, Captain, but there must be some error in translation. Did you say Class 12? "That's correct. Earth scores Class 12 on the Galactic Habitability Index. High gravity, aggressive predator ecosystem, extreme weather patterns, frequent natural disasters, and seasonal atmospheric toxicity. Veltar felt dizzy. The Galactic database listed class 12 worlds as incompatible with complex organic life. Yet these humans had not only survived on such a world, they developed space travel and advanced military technology. Captain Mitchell, Veltar said slowly, perhaps you could explain what seasonal atmospheric toxicity means? Oh, that's just winter in some regions. Temperatures drop low enough to kill most galactic species in minutes, and in certain areas, the air becomes toxic to breathe without protection. She sipped her coffee again. Most humans find it refreshing. Dr. Wayne Parker, the human xenobiologist, joined the conversation with a friendly smile. Don't worry, Ambassador. We've adapted our equipment to accommodate class. One species like yourselves. Our environmental suits can maintain your optimal conditions even in extreme combat zones. Combat zones? Veltar asked weakly. Well, yes. The Shard Collective tends to create rather hostile environments. Toxic crystalline dust, extreme temperature fluctuations, unstable terrain from their tunneling operations. Nothing we can't handle, but definitely outside normal caloric tolerance levels. General Mike Harrison entered the chamber, still wearing combat gear that looked like it could protect someone from a volcanic eruption. His casual entrance made the Kalari delegation instinctively move closer together. Captain Mitchell, Admiral Sullivan needs to know if we have authorization for atmospheric chemical deployment on Kalari 7. The bugs have dug in pretty deep, and conventional ordnance isn't reaching their lower tunnels. Veltar's translator struggled with several terms in Harrison's request. General, could you please explain what atmospheric chemical deployment involves? Harrison looked puzzled, as if the question should be obvious. We flood their tunnel systems with poison gas until they either die or surface into our kill zones. Standard pest control procedure. The silence that followed was deafening. The Kalari had no concept of chemical warfare. Their peaceful society had never developed such weapons. The idea of deliberately poisoning an entire planet's atmosphere was beyond their comprehension. General Harrison, Mitchell intervened diplomatically, perhaps you could explain the safety protocols to our new allies. Right. We use targeted deployment systems to ensure the chemicals only affect the underground tunnel networks. Surface atmosphere remains breathable for Class 1 species. We've done this hundreds of times on various worlds. Hundreds of times. Veltar realized that what seemed like an unprecedented catastrophe to his people was apparently routine work for humans. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Roberts joined the discussion, carrying a tactical display that showed detailed battle plans. Sir, we've identified 17 major shard concentrations on the primary agricultural worlds. Recommend coordinated orbital bombardment, followed by ground assault teams. Orbital bombardment? Veltar whispered. Precision strikes to collapse their tunnel networks. Roberts explained matter-of-factly. We use kinetic weapons to minimize collateral damage to your infrastructure. The impact craters can actually be useful for new irrigation systems once your people start rebuilding. Captain Mitchell noticed the growing distress of the Kalari delegation. Ambassador, I understand our methods might seem aggressive, but you have to remember we evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. Coordinated violence is how humans solve problems. But the casualties, Veltar protested. Your soldiers will be fighting in conditions that could kill them. The Shard Collective shows no mercy. Harrison actually laughed at this. Ambassador, with respect, we fought wars in environments that would kill most galactic species before they even met the enemy. Toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, high radiation zones. Tuesday afternoon for human infantry. Dr. Parker added helpfully. Human military doctrine assumes approximately 30% casualties in operations like this. We plan for our people to die and execute missions anyway. It's quite efficient. The casual way they discuss acceptable death rates made Veltar feel sick. These weren't heroes making noble sacrifices. They were calculating predators who factored in their own losses like any other resource. Mitchell seemed to sense his distress. Ambassador, I know this is difficult to understand, but your species call for help, and we're the ones who answered. The question now is whether you want us to solve your problem or not. Looking at the confident, deadly humans around him, Veltar realized they weren't just offering to fight the Shard Collective. They were offering to unleash something far more terrifying than silicon-based monsters. They were offering to unleash themselves. And despite his fear, he knew his dying people had no other choice. Colonel David Thompson crouched behind the twisted remains of what used to be a Kalari grain silo, watching his tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Shard Collective had turned this once peaceful agricultural world into a hellscape of crystalline spires and toxic dust storms, but his Marines were adapting faster than the enemy could respond. "Rodriguez, what's your status on the Eastern Tunnel Complex?" Thompson spoke into his comm unit, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "Sir, we got about 200 bugs trying to flank through the irrigation channels. They don't seem to understand that we can see in the dark." Sergeant Maria Rodriguez's voice carried a note of amusement. "Permission to light them up?" "Granted. Make it quick. We need those channels clear for chemical teams." Through his binoculars, Thompson watched his soldiers move through conditions that would kill most galactic species in minutes. The crystalline dust in the air was toxic to Kalari lungs. The temperature had dropped to levels that would freeze most alien solid, and the terrain was so unstable that every step could trigger a tunnel collapse. His Marines treated it like a training exercise. "Sir, this is Lieutenant Hayes with Demo Team 3. Another voice crackled through the comm. "We got charges set on the main processing facility. Soon as the bugs cluster around it, like you predicted, the whole structure comes down." Thompson smiled grimly. The Shard Collective moved in predictable patterns, following scent trails and heat signatures without any real tactical thinking. Against civilians, they were unstoppable. Against humans who'd learned to hunt in packs on a world filled with predators, they were just another pest problem. Aboard the orbiting command vessel, Ambassador Veltar watched the human operations with a mixture of fascination and horror. His people had tried to fight the Shard Collective using defensive positions and long-range weapons, hoping to minimize casualties while slowly pushing the invaders back. It hadn't worked. The humans were doing the exact opposite. "They're charging directly into the Shard formations," his tactical officer reported, disbelief clear in his voice. "No defensive positions, no retreat contingencies. They're just attacking." Captain Mitchell stood beside Veltar on the observation deck, apparently unbothered by watching her own species walk into what looked like certain death. "Ambassador, you have to understand something about human military doctrine. We don't fight to minimize casualties. We fight to win as quickly as possible." On the ground, Lieutenant Commander James Parker led his squad through a maze of crystalline spires that scrape against the toxic sky. His environmental suit systems were working overtime to filter out the poisonous atmosphere, but he barely noticed the warnings flashing on his display. "Contact front," Corporal Lisa Bennett shouted as a group of shard creatures emerged from a hidden tunnel. The crystalline beings moved like a living wall of razor-sharp death, their silicon bodies reflecting the dim light as they charged. Parker's response was immediate and brutal. "Formation Alpha, focus fire on the lead elements, then sweep and clear." The humans moved with lethal precision, each soldier covering specific angles while maintaining perfect coordination. They practiced these maneuvers in Earth's most hostile environments: Arctic wastelands, toxic swamps, underground cave systems where the air itself would kill you. This was just another Tuesday. Veltar watched in amazement as the human squad not only survived the Shard assault, but completely destroyed it in under 30 seconds. How are they doing this? The Shard Collective has overrun every military force they've encountered. Because every other military force in the galaxy fights like prey animals, Mitchell explained. They set up defensive positions, try to minimize risk, and hope to wear down the enemy over time. Humans fight like apex predators. We accept high casualties in exchange for quick victories. The truth of her words became clear as Thompson's voice echoed across the command frequency. "All units, be advised, we're taking heavy casualties on the northern approach. Estimate 40% losses in second platoon, maintaining advance anyway." 40% losses. The number made Veltar feel physically sick. Any Kalari commander would immediately retreat, and regroup after losing even 10% of their forces. The humans were treating catastrophic casualties as acceptable losses and continuing their attack. "Sir, this is Sergeant Williams with Chemical Team 2. Another voice reported. We successfully deployed atmospheric processors in Tunnel Network 7 through 12. Estimate enemy casualties in the thousands. Ready to advance to next target." Dr. Wayne Parker's clinical voice joined the conversation from the medical bay. "Command, field hospitals are operating at full capacity. Current human casualty rate is within predicted parameters. Kalari civilian rescue operations proceeding ahead of schedule, within predicted parameters." The humans had calculated exactly how many of their own people would die and planned accordingly. They'd even prepared medical facilities specifically designed to treat both their own wounded and rescued civilians. Colonel Thompson's final report of the day summarized the operation with terrifying efficiency. "Command, this is Ground Team Alpha. Primary objective secured. Enemy resistance collapsing on all fronts. The bugs are abandoning positions they held for months and retreating to deep space." "Outstanding work, Colonel." Admiral Sullivan's voice came through clearly. "Casualty report? 437 Kia, 812 wounded. Well within acceptable mission parameters." Veltar stared at Captain Mitchell in shock. "Your people just suffered what we would consider a devastating military disaster, and your admiral is congratulating Commander?" Mitchell nodded calmly. "Ambassador, we knew going in that this operation would cost us approximately 500 lives. The fact that we came in under that estimate means it was a successful mission." As Veltar watched the Shard Collective fleeing from worlds they'd held for months, he realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans hadn't just defeated an unstoppable enemy. They'd made it look easy, and they'd done it by being something far more terrifying than any crystalline monster. They were predators who turned warfare into a science and death into an acceptable cost of doing business. The galaxy had asked for help, not knowing that the cure might be more dangerous than the disease. Ambassador Veltar stood at the observation window of the human flagship, watching the final shard formations retreat into the darkness of deep space. The crystalline monsters that had terrorized his people for months were fleeing like frightened animals, abandoning worlds they'd held with iron certainty just days before. But instead of feeling pure relief, Veltar felt something cold and unsettling growing in his chest. Around him, human officers discussed the aftermath of their victory with the same casual tone they'd used to plan a dinner menu. "Final casualty report, Admiral," Colonel Thompson announced, his voice carrying across the bridge with professional detachment. 437 killed in action, 812 wounded, 63 missing presumed dead. Total mission losses, 1,412 personnel. Admiral Kate Sullivan nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, Colonel. Well below our projected casualty ceiling of 1,500. How's the cleanup proceeding?" "Atmospheric processors have cleared the toxins from 7 worlds. Kalari civilians are already beginning to return to the outer colonies. We should have full environmental restoration completed within 2 weeks." Veltar felt dizzy listening to this exchange. Over 1,400 humans had died to save his people, and their admiral was treating it like a successful business transaction. These weren't numbers on a report. They were living beings who'd given their lives for a species they'd never met before. Captain Lisa Mitchell approached him with a steaming cup of that bitter human drink she called coffee. "You look troubled, Ambassador. I thought you'd be celebrating." "Captain, your people just suffered massive casualties to save strangers. How can you be so calm about it?" Mitchell sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Ambassador, those 1,400 volunteers knew the risks when they signed up. They died doing exactly what they trained for, protecting innocent people from threats they couldn't handle themselves. In human culture, that's considered an honorable death." General Mike Harrison joined their conversation, still wearing combat gear stained with crystalline dust, and things Veltar didn't want to identify. "Admiral Sullivan wants to discuss establishing a permanent human presence in this sector. Apparently, our intelligence reports show 17 other species dealing with similar problems." "Similar problems?" Veltar asked weakly. "The Void Reapers have been hitting trade routes near the Centauri systems. The Iron Legion is enslaving mining colonies in the Outer Rim. And there's something called a hunger that's been consuming entire space stations near the galactic core. Harrison rattled off these threats like he was reading a grocery list. Admiral Sullivan classifies them all as manageable security threats. Manageable security threats. The monsters that had driven entire civilizations to the edge of extinction were being discussed like minor inconveniences that needed cleaning up. Dr. Wayne Parker approached with a tablet full of data. Ambassador, we've completed our analysis of Kalari physiology and psychology. Admiral Sullivan asked me to prepare a comprehensive species profile for our diplomatic database. What kind of profile? Veltar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Standard first contact assessment. Military capabilities. Technological level. Potential threat rating. Alliance value. And cultural compatibility with human operational doctrine. Parker scrolled through his notes with academic interest. Your species score is very high on alliance potential, but extremely low on military capability. Classic protected species classification. Protected species. The term hit Veltar like a physical blow. The humans weren't treating the Kalari as equals who'd been helped in a crisis. They were cataloging them as helpless civilians who needed permanent protection. Admiral Sullivan's voice echoed across the bridge as she addressed her command staff. All department heads, prepare for extended deployment. We're establishing forward operating base Armstrong on Kalari 7 and maintaining a permanent patrol schedule throughout this sector. Ma'am, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Roberts asked, what's our rules of engagement for other species in the region? Standard protection protocols. Any species requesting assistance gets it. Any species threatening protected civilizations gets eliminated. And any species that looks like it might be able to match our capabilities, Sullivan paused with what might have been a smile, gets an invitation to join our training exercises. Veltar realized with growing horror that humanity wasn't just establishing a military presence. They were claiming the entire sector as their responsibility. Every species, every conflict, every threat was now subject to human judgment and human solutions. Captain Mitchell seemed to read his thoughts. Ambassador, I know this feels overwhelming, but look at it from our perspective. We just discovered an entire region of space where peaceful civilizations are being terrorized by threats they can't handle. What kind of neighbors would we be if we just walked away? Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's intervention was spreading faster than hyperspace communications could carry it. The Altarian Republic immediately began drafting mutual defense treaties with Earth. The vegan assemblies started offering their agricultural worlds as human supply bases. Even the mighty Centauri Alliance, who'd refused to help the Kalari, sent diplomatic envoys requesting meetings with Admiral Sullivan. But other species were drawing different conclusions. The Nexus Confederation began emergency military expansion programs. The Shadow Syndicate started researching human weaknesses. And in the deep reaches of unexplored space, ancient civilizations that had slumbered for millennia began stirring, wondering if these new humans might eventually view them as threats needing management. General Harrison returned to their conversation with news that made Veltar's blood run cold. Admiral Sullivan wants to know if there are any other class, 12 Deathworld species in this region. Apparently, we're always looking for good sparring partners. Sparring partners. The humans weren't just looking for problems to solve. They were actively seeking out species that might provide them with interesting challenges. As Veltar watched human ships establishing patrol routes around his homeworld, he realized that his people's desperate plea for help had fundamentally changed the galaxy's balance of power. They hadn't just been saved by humanity. They'd introduced apex predators to an ecosystem of prey animals. The age of peaceful coexistence was ending. The age of human protection had begun. And whether that protection would prove to be salvation or conquest, Veltar was no longer certain there was a meaningful difference. The humans had answered their call for help, but in doing so, they claimed the right to decide who else might need helping, and who might need stopping.